Hello everyone. Let's talk about climate change. It's an issue that's important for all of our futures. Now, when we discuss climate change in 2023, we're discussing something completely different to what we were discussing 10 years ago. Back then, we were trying to convince people that climate change was real and that we had to do something about it. Now, we know that most people are aware of that. And what we actually need to talk about is what do we do about it and how. Well, what do we do about it? We know we need to eliminate all fossil fuels by 2050. The tricky part is how. Now, it's not a small task. That involves decarbonizing our electricity grid, eliminating all fossil fuels in our heating, transportation, and our industries. And on top of that, we have to provide for the hundreds of millions who still live without electricity. Now, what could possibly do such an enormous task? The answer to that is not wind and solar energy. Now, although those have become cheaper over the years, they're still nowhere near consistent enough for us to implement them full scale. Because the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, that's why they're only active 30% of the time. And that's why, although we've invested tens of trillions into the technology, they still only make up 10% of our global electricity output. Now, on the other hand, we do have one energy source that doesn't have any of these problems and at the same time is very clean. And that's nuclear energy. It's the only energy source that has been tried and tested to be a proven model for decarbonization. France decided to implement nuclear energy full scale, and within 15 years, over 70% of the energy came from nuclear, and almost all of their carbon emissions from fossil fuels were eliminated. And compare that to countries in Africa who have went all in for solar and wind, who are now facing one of the worst energy crises we've ever seen. But that's not what people are concerned about. People are mostly concerned about the safety of nuclear energy. But nuclear energy is actually very safe. From this chart, you can see that nuclear is the second least deadly energy source. It even surpasses wind energy. But that doesn't matter. What we need to focus on is we have to look at the reliable energy sources. And there, we see that nuclear far surpasses energy sources like gas, oil, and coal. Then people say, how about the disasters? Fukushima disaster, Chernobyl disaster. What about them? Well, in the Fukushima disaster, people only ever died because of the mass hysteria and the very badly calculated evacuation that occurred right after. People got high blood pressure, they got panic attacks, they committed suicide because they were so scared of radiation and because they were displaced from their families. If we had not evacuated people, not as many people would die. And the culprit was not the nuclear radiation, it was the evacuation. Now, in the Chernobyl accident, the plant was so bad, it was riddled with so much flagrant procedure and design errors that we know no plant like it, or close to being like it, will ever be built again. Now, even then, if one Chernobyl accident happened every single year, we would still kill less people than fossil fuels do right now. Over 7 million people die each year from air pollution, and that is largely a result of things like coal and oil. Now, the second thing people are concerned about is nuclear waste. What do we do about it? Now, it's actually a much smaller problem than it really seems. Nuclear waste is very compact. The amount of waste one nuclear plant generates can fit into a little desk drawer in the amount of waste it generates in 1 year. And the total amount of nuclear waste that Switzerland has generated over the course of 1 year can fit into this stage alone. Now, even then, we take the extraordinary measures to encase it in steel canisters, which we then encase in hard concrete, and then we bury it all underground. Now, nuclear is one of the only energy sources to be very responsible in its handling of waste, yet it's still the most scrutinized for some reason. Now, the third reason people are concerned about nuclear energy is that it's expensive. But this is really ironic, because the reason it's so expensive is because people are so scared of nuclear energy that they start pushing these unnecessary regulations on it and safety features that end up making building plants much more expensive. Now, if we can just drop our fear of it, stop being so paranoid of it, then we can easily make nuclear cheap again, just like how it was before. But even then, countries like Germany have pledged to decommission all the nuclear power plants, and Germany is doing this by April of this year. What actually happened next with them is that they ended up having to plug their massive hole in their energy system with fossil fuels that came from Russia. So now that Russia is invading Ukraine, Germany is essentially forced to sponsor their genocide of the Ukrainians. Now, you might be wondering, so if I'm not just lying to you through my teeth, if all of this is true, then why don't we all know about it? Why aren't we doing this right now? Well, the first reason is that it's just intuitive. It makes sense to be scared of nuclear energy. It's just like how we're scared of flying on planes, even though cars are much more deadly. Because it makes sense that when a plane flies into the sky, it can come tumbling down. And also, when a plane accident happens, it goes all over news headlines, while when a car accident happens, everyone just moves on. With nuclear energy, when an accident happens, it's the headline of the century. And when coal energy kills 7 million people per year, no one bats an eye. But the second reason, which is quite linked as well, is that the media and Hollywood are very, very, very scared about nuclear energy. They provoke mass hysteria, they fearmonger about it. For example, back 40 years ago, there was a nuclear accident in the United States at a plant called 3 Mile Island. And in this accident, no one died, and the total amount of radiation exposure anyone would have received would be less than a chest X-ray. But even then, the media decided to label it the worst nuclear accident in all of US history. And also by coincidence, just a few weeks earlier, a Hollywood film released that suggested a nuclear accident could drill a hole all the way from the US to China. So what happened next was that people got scared, started protesting. And ever since then, nuclear energy in America has been on a steep decline. Now the third reason is that some organizations would benefit from the lack of nuclear energy. And these organizations don't just benefit from nuclear energy's downfall, they benefit from the downfall of climate action. And I'm talking about fossil fuel companies. So fossil fuel companies, they're always in a really bad spot because they're essentially against humanity. Their business profits off of the destruction of our planet. So they know that in order to stay in business, they have to attempt really crazy things. Back a couple decades ago, they did research on the climate before anyone else did, and they found really bad results, and they hid it all from the public. They're doing something similar now. So essentially, it works like this. They know that wind and solar energy will never run alone. But they know that nuclear energy will, and that scares them. So what they do is they invest lots of money into wind and solar to pretend that they're on our side, while at the same time they silently undermine nuclear energy by doing things like funding anti-nuclear organizations. These organizations are very broad. They even include some of the world's green parties, like the Green Party of Germany and the Green Party of America. They're supposed to be the environmentalists that are fighting for the planet, and they're being paid by fossil fuel companies to undermine a planet. And they also do things like this. They pay journalists to write articles like this. But essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to divide the environmentalist movement up. They know that they can't take everyone on their own, but if they can separate everyone, make them fight against each other, then they'll have a much easier time. Now I'm being quite pessimistic, but actually there is light at the end of the tunnel. We are seeing some hope. Just a few weeks ago, we saw one of the first innovations in nuclear technology in many decades, nuclear fusion. You don't need to know the details of it to know that It's a massive breakthrough in nuclear technology, and you also don't need to be an expert on it to know that people are getting excited about it. What we're seeing is that people are actually seeing this nuclear energy in a good light. Instead of freaking out that there's going to be an accident, people are seeing that, wow, this is really cool. And even better, the media is actually portraying it in a good light for once. And why this is so important is because what this energy source needs, is what it lacks right now is people behind it. People are scared of it, but if only they weren't, then we can actually implement it and save our planet. Now, just like how 10 years ago we were advocating to people about how climate change was real, now our next step is to be showing people that nuclear energy will save our planet. And thank you.